We're going to go back in time. We're going to go back, way back. So that's the truth, right? So when we think about these things, we think about the idea that when we wanted and we decided collectively in the United States at the time of whatever, our Declaration of Independence and our call to independence, which we say happened in 1776. But when you think about the real side of this and the real things that have happened back then, it all started way before 1776, right? So according to documentation, and this is all facts, and fact checking and all that stuff can happen. You could start any of that right now at any point. Is that back in 1765, is that we started this whole idea of us as the colonists, the American colonists, is that we still had this British rule. So what was happening is that, Britain was basically telling us is that, okay, well, you guys may have colonized what's going on here, but we're going to tax you. We're going to tax you on everything that you're importing. We're going to tax you on everything you're doing. We're just going to keep taxing you until you guys, basically how it works in landlord terminology is that we tax until you guys can't afford the taxes anymore, and then we just take it from you. And how horrible is that? Right? Because that's what taxation is. Taxation is a way for governments and rulers and lords to basically impose or literally take money or belongings or anything that they want at that time. And they take it until you can't afford or do not have anything to give them anymore. And then basically they take whatever is left. That's how it works. There is no difference now as to there was then. And my thought on this process is that isn't that the reason we decided to break away from big governments? We decided this as colonists, as people that came here to this country. We decided to break away from this because we felt it was unfair. At some point in time, we decided it was unfair. So we started a revolution. And that's 1776 and the Declaration of Independence. And it's like, we didn't ask permission, correct? We didn't ask permission. We kind of basically set the ground rules saying, listen to me, we're not paying your taxes anymore because we have decided as the colonists, because we're the ones that live here. We're the ones that are growing this country. We're the ones that are providing the labor and all the things that need to go into growing this country that we so-called, came to colonize as much as we like to call colonization, as much as it's conquering, actually. But we decided at that point that we wanted this. We didn't want their so-called representation because it wasn't there. It just wasn't. So in other words, they were basically deciding that because it was colonized at this point, that they had the right to keep taking money from us without any representation, right? Hence the Tea Party. So when it happened in Boston, and everybody was kind of like at this point fed up, right, with the tea taxes, and they put taxes on everything. And isn't that what's happening now? Isn't there just ways for the government to create taxes for us to keep giving them money? Isn't that crazy? Isn't it obscure to think that, isn't that why we colonized here? For the simple fact that we didn't want to have these lords and these owners and these kings and these rulers and all these people that kept taking from the people. We didn't want it to happen anymore. We were like, listen to me.
Oh, hell no.
At that point, that's what we decided. We decided these things that it was enough. We decided that we didn't want that to happen anymore. So every time they kept saying, no, we're going to tax that, we were like, no. Well, we're going to tax that. No. So we decided this. So what happened? That we as the people and the freedoms that we thought that we were kind of going to set for ourselves, as they wrote in this declaration, in the Constitution, We the people, and I bring this up and I will bring it up at every chance I get, and is that that's we the people. All these things were written down and given, so-called given to us, because we understood. We thought we understood that we didn't want to be told and taxed and things taken from us for no reason, right? So when you think about what's happening now in Russia and the Ukraine and all these things that are happening, who gives any one person the right to decide that it's not the owner's property anymore? When do we decide as people to people that we get to decide to take something from somebody else for no reason, right? Isn't that the reason, like we say, we're civilized? Because the idea is that we've decided at some point that this wasn't okay anymore. Like I said before, what stops anybody from going anywhere and taking anything from anybody? What stops us? Nothing. Nothing stops us except for our common decency from people to people, person to person, right? That's what's supposed to separate us from uncivilized. And that's the truth, right? Because we know it's not right. We know in the back of our minds that it's probably a very conscious thought at one point for somebody to say, nope, that's it, that's mine, and it doesn't matter. So I think about these things often now, right? Because we have this happening now, and we've had these things that have happened to us here, even on the planet, right? When we think about it here in the United States, we think, everything that's happened with COVID is that lockdowns and masks and all these things, and the idea of control and how it gets controlled and who gets controlled for whatever reason, right? Because we've seen it on the news, we've seen it everywhere, right? Is that all these people that were telling us wear those masks and get those vaccines and all those things, they're not doing it themselves. So again, I think about this taxation without representation is that basically they're telling us, like the old adage, don't do as I do as I tell you to do. And when at what point did we decide here that we, the people, were just going to do that? We don't know. I don't think a lot of people out there really understand the magnitude of the actual freedoms that we have. And is it just freedom? Are we just free and dumb? Or do we need to take back some of that free and smart? I think that's the issue, right? We have to be free and smart about it. So when you decide to do these things voluntarily, after a while it becomes mandatory, if you understand what I mean, right? Because in the beginning it was, please, let's shorten the curve, stay home for 14 days and wear a mask if you're, not feeling well, you're around other people. And then before we knew it, it became mandatory. It became, put the mask on, now go get a shot. So it became a mandatory. Because the voluntary thing is kind of a way of saying to us, okay, you have the right to do, choose, and decide. And then all of a sudden, when they don't like the way that's going, they change the rules again. And then they make it mandatory. Because it's the ruling technique. It's the fear technique. It's the idea that they fear us into doing whatever it is they want us to do. Because fear is the only ruler that they have, right? So when you're paying your taxes on these things that you own and you paid for, that the government had no right to put any extra money or restitution on it at any way, shape, or form. That's the truth. So if you buy a home and you pay X amount of dollars, you own the home and you own the property that it's on. And I know this is going to get all up in arms, right? And this is what I want everybody to do, please. And that is, if you have any questions and comments, please leave them below. I'm very interested in what everybody thinks about this idea for taxes, because when we think about it as a whole, right, is that I use this idea of if you own a home and you purchase a home, you have to take a loan to a bank. And yes, if you're getting loaned money and they want some interest, yes, by all means, somebody gave you a lot of money. maybe a little thank you along the line really does help, right? Gives back and maybe helps somebody else do the same. It's understandable. But when the government has nothing to do with this transaction at all whatsoever, so then how is it that they deem themselves righteous enough to take tax money from you afterwards?